Mark Elder conducting the Halle Orchestra led by Lynn Fletcher. That was Vaughan Williams' Fantasia on the theme of Thomas Tallis. It's 7 minutes to 10, listening to Essential Classics, and back at 9:30 I gave you today's playlist the challenge, which is The Blue-Eyed Fairy, music that Elgar wrote to the play The Starlight Express. We've had a message from Anne J in West Wales to say, so you can't talk about fairies and children just before Christmas without sugar plums. You know what I'm referring to, and I imagine there'll be an avalanche of them. Well, and Tchaikovsky's Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies, we may possibly have had one or two suggestions for that so far. Here's another text message from Gareth Ryan in Kilwinning in Ayrshire, who says, what about John Williams' theme, the prologue from the film Hook? Steven Spielberg's sequel to Peter Pan, which featured Julia Roberts as the fairy Tinkerbell. Good thinking, Gareth, and like I said earlier, film music, that could be perfect for this today. Then from John Williams, the composer, to John Williams, the guitarist, and William Mearns in Exmouth and Devon says, for a tune on a fairy theme, how about Dance of the Little Fairies by the group Sky? Okay, a rock band may be a bit tangential for Radio 3, but there's a harpsichord in there, plus, of course, John Williams on classical guitar, and it's a cracking tune too. William, I'm not sure anything is too tangential for Essential Classics, and I will always do my very best to get John Williams into the playlist, so let's see what I can do. One more message for now, and an anonymous text message which reads simply, how about the music from the Fairy Washing Up Liquid advert? Okay, we will look into it. Maybe there's a string quartet arrangement of hands that do dishes. Let's see. Anyway, you've got plenty of time to send us your message. Email essentialclassics@bbc.co.uk, text 83111, tweet at BBC Radio 3, and we will decide on the final sequence by 10:45. We've got part of Alfred Schnitt's Suite in the Old Style now, rock music that gets thrown into the blender with some 1960s dissonance and jolting rhythms, and some of this was originally intended as incidental music to a Soviet film about a magical dentist who could pull out the teeth without any pain. The pantomime and fugue from Alfred Schnittke's Suite in the Olden style. Harpsichordist was Olga Martinova. Percussion was played by Andrei Doinkov and Dmitry Vlasik. And Roman Mintz was playing viola d'amore.
Composer of the Week follows intertwined lives of two key figures in France in the 19th century. Join me, Don McLeod, to discover more about Frédéric Chopin and his romantic and creative relationship with Georges Sand. From their introduction by Franz Liszt to their intellectual salon lives in Paris, to Sand making their problems public in her novels. Frédéric Chopin is Composer of the Week this Monday to Friday at noon on Radio 3 and BBC Sounds.
The closing movement of Mozart's Third Horn Concerto. The soloist was Sarah Willis, with the Havana Lyceum Orchestra conducted by Jose Antonio Mendez Patron. It's 10:05. Let's see how things are shaping up with the Playlist Challenge.
There's a fairy that hides in the beautiful eyes of the children who feel how well.
It was the Blue Eyes Fairy, Elgar's song from the play The Starlight Express. So the theme of music for children's plays, children's stories and fairies. Philip Mendenhall in York says a film, The Fairies, based on the story of the Cottingley Fairies, which was about the exploits of a photographer and his fake photos of fairies at the bottom of the garden in Cottingley, West Yorkshire. The film had theme music by Zbigniew Preisner. Hopefully you can locate the soundtrack. Philip, we are attempting to locate it as I speak. Then Judy Barnes in Swansea says, Lorna Val's introductory theme music to this TV series, His Dark Materials, based on the Philip Pullman trilogy, would be fitting. And Swansea's Glendivian Gallery has an awesome exhibition on now of the props and clothes, including the alethiometer. Thank you very much for that, Judy. If I'm right, I think the alethiometer was the compass in the story. I've got that completely wrong there. And then Debbie says, welcome from a foggy Leicester. If we're talking about fairies, then what better than something from Iolanthe? I won't go too far into the plot, as we haven't got all day, and it's a typical Gilbert and Sullivan convoluted storyline, but it is to do with fairies and the House of Lords. If chosen, choice of track entirely up to you, Tom, but something where the fairies are in the House of Lords might be appropriate. Thank you very much for that, Debbie. And one more for now. This was a text message we received to say, for today's playlist to challenge, a favourite tale from my childhood was an LP. Peter and the Wolf narrated by Richard Baker, but more recently I've discovered a glorious recording narrated by Dame Edna Everidge. That is definitely going to check that out. Still all will be revealed at 10:45, so keep them coming to Essential Classics at bbc.co.uk. Text 83111, tweet at BBC Radio 3, but we'll continue now with a voyage out into the North Sea. A journey from Dundee to Shetland, accompanied by dolphins and seabirds, because that's what Sally Beamish had in mind when she wrote her concerto for Scottish fiddle and harp, Sea Bakers. Haven, the third movement of Sally B's double concerto, C. Vegas. Chris Stout was playing fiddle, Katrina Mackay was playing harp, and they were both with the Scottish Ensemble. And there's a good story about the first rehearsal for that piece, because there was a point where the musicians in the Scottish Ensemble asked Chris Stout why he missed out a big chunk of Beamish's score, to which he replied, "Well, I just didn't fancy that bit." Love it. There's plenty of pieces that would benefit from. Anyway, it is 14 minutes past 10. You're listening to Essential Classics, and for your song of the day, here's a number from the 1939 Broadway musical Very Warm for May. Music by Jerome Kern, words by Oscar Hammond. Now, it wasn't their greatest success, but one song in particular has become a classic, All the Things You Are. And in this live performance, recorded at London's Wigmore Hall, London's Wigmore Hall is what I meant to say. Joyce DiDonato is the mezzo with pianist Antonio Papano.
Time and again I long for adventure, something to make my heart beat faster. What I long for, I know the love I found my adventure. Touch your hand, my heart beats so fast.
Recorded at Wigmore Hall in London, that was All the Things You Are by Jerome Kern and Oscar Hammerstein. The mezzo-soprano was Joyce DiDonato with pianist Antonio Papano. And that was your song of the day. Do let us know what you want to hear in that slot. Essential Classics at bbc.co.uk is the place to send us your emails. We've Debussy now, and one of the two dances he wrote for harp and orchestra. One was a sacred dance, but we'll hear the profane. Debussy's Danse Profane, his profane dance played by harpist Lisa Wellbaum, with the Cleveland Orchestra conducted by Pierre Boulez. We'll be hitting the ice rink in Budapest shortly, followed by a drive down the Californian highway after a trio sonata by Dietrich Buxtehude. And throughout the whole performance of this F major trio sonata, the musicians of Arcangelo put across a feeling that everything is somehow improvised. It can't possibly be improvised, and yet it feels that way, but with this remarkable intuition between the four players. The ensemble Arcangelo playing Buxtehude's Trio Sonata in F, Opus 2, number 7. It's 26 minutes to 11, and producer Hannah sent me a link last night to a webcam showing the incredible ice rink in the centre of Budapest. It's bizarrely hypnotic, I have to say, just watching people glide in a loop around this huge sheet of ice, bigger than a football field, with this stunning Vajdahunya castle. Crown Prince Rudolf of the Austro-Hungarian Empire opened the rink in 1870, 9 years before Brahms composed his Hungarian dances. Hungarian dances number 20 and 21 by Brahms, with those orchestrations by Dvorak, and it was Ivan Fischer conducting the Budapest Festival Orchestra. Well, if you've still not sent us your suggestions, I'm running low because you've got about 8 minutes before producer Anna has to press the green button for go. Until then, a piece that came to John Adams in a dream, driving down the Californian highway when 2 black limousines pulled up by his side. And he said, the most thrilling one I had recently was a tepid nightmare that my car had run out of windscreen wash. When I woke up, got to the car the next morning, nope, the car was full of windscreen wash. Perhaps that's why I've never quite had the imagination to write a piece like John Adams's grand pianola music. Michael Tilson Thomas conducting the San Francisco Symphony and synergy vocals with pianists Orly Shaham and Marc-Andre Hamelin. That was On the Dominant Divide, the third movement of the Grand Pianola music by John Adams. It's 12 minutes to 11. You're listening to Essential Classics, and it is time to reveal the playlist.
There's a fairy that hides in the beautiful eyes of the children who feed her well. In the little
So it all began with that amazing voice of Bryn Tervel singing Elgar's The Blue Eyes Fairy, a song that he wrote for the play The Starlight Express. Ruth Stone in Colchester says, for pure artless charm, how about There Are Fairies at the Bottom of Our Garden by Rose Farman and Lisa Lehman. Sarah Walker's recording with Roger Vignoles in the 1980s keeps up the breathless whimsy with fabulous comic timing to boot. What's not to like? Indeed, Ruth, and Richard Andrews in Sussex agrees. So Fairies at the Bottom of Our Garden, sung by Sarah Walker, is in the playlist. That's followed by Irene McFarlane's suggestion, and Irene says the sparkling tinkling bells perfectly suit the fairy Tinkerbell in Italian composer Silvio Amato's music for the ice dance show version of Peter Pan. Thank you for that, Irene. That felt like a perfect match. Now, as I mentioned, nothing is off limits for the playlist when it comes to how you think of ideas. So Peter from Lewis has sent us this text to say, nothing too tangentially. Well, how about something played by the wonderful Fairy Band? John Clark also wants the Fairy Band, as does Rob Bishop, who's asked for them playing Elgar. We will hear the Fairy Band playing Elgar's Minuet from the 7 Suite. And that will take us to the end of the playlist. And this message from Hilary in South Norfolk, who says, what could be more perfect than the final selection from Ravel's glorious collection of fairy tales, the Mother Goose Suite, the Fairy Garden. But to begin, Janet Wall says, hello from chilly Dorset. The fog is just about lifting and making the landscape look quite magical. So how about the Sugar Plum Fairy? Felicity Hanson on the Isle of Mull says, please let's have the magical, mythical news of the Sugar Plum Fairy. It's been an accompaniment to my ballet classes for the last 75 years. Arthur in Nottingham as well. Could we please have the Sugar Plum Fairy from the Nutcracker by Tchaikovsky, that essential Christmas ballet, and with huge thanks to all the dancers who've given us such pleasure over the years, from the Northern Ballet, New Adventures, Birmingham, and the Royal Ballet. That's also been suggested by Sally Giffen in Bicester, Piers Patrick Hines in Airdrie, and Anne Jay in West Wales. So we are off to the ballet, and we will start the playlist with the dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy.
Sing when the fairy queen and king now the king is very proud and very with its
Cantrill-Fenwick, the fairy garden from Ravel's Mother Goose. It was the Rotterdam Philharmonic conducted by Yannick Nézet-Séguin ending our playlist. Before that, you heard the minuet from Elgar's Seven Suite, that's the River Seven. It was played by the Fairy Band, whose base is in Stockport, just a few miles away from here at Media City. Before that, it was Tinkerbell, Silvio Amato's music from his Ballet on Ice, Peter Pan. Before that, you heard soprano Sarah Walker with pianist Roger Vignoles. The Sugar Plum Fairy from Tchaikovsky's The Nut, and it was Andre Previn conducting the London Symphony Orchestra. And that sprinkling of fairy magic all came from the Blue Eyes Fairy by Elgar. Thank you as always for playlist the challenge. Recharge the brain over the weekend and let's all again from 9:30 on Monday. But there's still plenty more to come in Essential Classic before midday. After a quick word from Ian McMillan.
This week's verb is another chance to hear my conversation with the great Scottish poet of love and history, Douglas Duffy. That's Ian and Douglas, Verb Talking, tonight at 10 o'clock here on Radio 3 and BBC Sounds.
When God your mind can lost to life again renewed from pain and death, to life again pain and death forever. My gates of heaven behold wide. Oh, is open and freedom. Let's stand the house of God. Take out the ringing gates.
The final chorus from The Seasons by Haydn. The soloists were Jeremy Ovenden, Carolyn Sampson, and Andrew Foster Williams, with the Gabriele Consort and Wrocław Baroque Orchestra, conducted by Paul McCreish. We are into the final hour of Essential Classics, and before I pass you on to Donald McLeod, the composer of the week, and his last episode on Chopin, you can still look forward to violinist Hilary Hahn with another modern encore from our album of the week. There's Elizabeth McConkey's celebration of the 1953 coronation, and your slow moment is Pastoral Bliss from Gerald Finzi. That's all to come after The Awakening of Finland or The Fatherland, two titles that Sibelius toyed with before finally settling on Finlandia. Finlandia by Sibelius. Esa-Pekka Salonen was conducting the Swedish Radio Symphony Orchestra. It's 21 minutes past 11. You're listening to Essential Classics with me, Tom McKinney. And let's have one last dip into our album of the week. 27 new pieces to be played as encores, covering a huge range of, well, however you want to define what an encore piece actually is. And all of these were commissioned and recorded here by violinist Hilary Hahn. Now, the only restriction to give to those 27 composers was that their piece had to be under 5 minutes. Today, we'll hear Somei Sato's offering, which comes in just about under that limit. And this is a Japanese expression of beauty, bifu. Bifu Sato from my album of the week. 27 encore pieces played by violinist Hilary Hahn and pianist Corey Smythe. And a new album of the week starting on Monday. Do not miss this. Joanna McGregor live in Buenos Aires with the Britten Sinfonia. You can hear that every day in the programme a little after 11. That's looking ahead to Monday, but what about looking ahead to tonight? Radio 3 in concert at 7:30. It's a performance of Michael Tippett's oratorio, Child of Our Time, the London Philharmonic Orchestra and Chorus conducted by Edward Gardner, and an incredible list of superstar soloists. Also on the programme, Vaughan Williams' Serenade to Music, which was written just a year before A Child of Our Time. So that's in concert tonight at 7:30. And we've got one of Vaughan Williams' many students next from his years teaching in London at the Royal College of Music. Elizabeth McConkie studied with Vaughan Williams in the 1920s. They kept in touch for many years after. And here's a piece that McConkie wrote to mark the coronation in 1953, her overture, Proud Thames. Vernon Handley was conducting the London Philharmonic Orchestra. That was the overture Proud Thames by Elizabeth McConkie. It's 26 minutes to 12. If you joined us for the last half hour, welcome to Essential Classics, and it's around this time in the programme of the day where you have our permission to disconnect and enjoy a slow moment. And this morning with a piece, well, it gets suggested for the playlist challenge quite a lot, but we thought it would be ideal for a slow moment. It's the Eclogue for Piano and Strings by Gerald Finzi, a piece intended to be the central movement of a piano concerto. I'm not sure why, but the outer parts never materialised, and so Finzi reworked this as a standalone piece and gave it this curious title. An eclogue in classical poetry takes the form of a conversation between shepherds. Tom Foster's the pianist in this recording, with Nicholas Collin conducting the Aurora Orchestra. Tom Poster was for piano and strings, with the Aurora Orchestra conducted by Nicholas Collin. And that was your slow moment for today. Do let us know your ideas for a slow moment. Email us on essentialclassics@bbc.co.uk. Sibobit Eos. He fed them with the rich corn by William Byrd. Graham Ross was conducting the choir of Clare College, Cambridge. Well, in Composer of the Week at midday, Donald looking at the last days of Chopin's relationship with Georges Sand. And talking of Chopin, he died when Saint-Saëns was 14. He said later in life that one of his biggest regrets was not making the effort to see him in concert. So I'll wave you off into the weekend with Saint-Saëns paying his respects to another composer from before Chopin, the composer who he also loved, Charpentier. And so he wrote a suite of pieces modelled on Charpentier, and we will hear the Sarabande and Rigodon. The Saraband and Rigodon by Saint-Saëns. Ewan Markle was conducting the National Orchestra of Lille. And that's all we've time for today. Our programme was produced by Hannah Thorne, Guy Worker, our studio manager. Thanks to them both and to you for joining us this morning and all throughout the week. Hope you've enjoyed the mix of familiar and new. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you again on Monday from 9 for more Essential Classics.
BBC Sounds.
We adverts hyping up the latest wonder products. This will change your life. But what are the facts behind the facts? From collagen supplements to sad lamps, natural deodorants to fitness trackers, I am on another bunk-busting mission to test the latest consumer trends. Do these wonder products deliver? Are they really the best thing since sliced bread?
The new series of Radio 4's Sliced Bread. Listen on BBC Sounds.
You're listening to BBC Radio. Looking ahead to this afternoon, the Consone Quartets are playing works by Haydn and Mendelssohn in the lunchtime concert after the 1 o'clock news. But it's midday now, time for Composer of the Week, and here's Old MacLeod.
Welcome again to Composer of the Week. We reached the end of this week's story, charting a relationship between one of the most famous and literary figures in 19th century France, Georges Sand, and one of the greatest composers for the piano, Frédéric Chopin.
That was Chopin's final composition, his Mazurka number 51. It was made by Vladimir Ashkenazy. On Chopin's tomb in the Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris is a sculpture of a breathing, seated female figure in white marble, her head bowed over her lyre. But the most important female figure in Chopin's life, Georges Sand, was not there at the graveside to see the handful of earth, especially from Poland, scattered on his coffin. So what happened? Today, I'll be exploring how this most significant relationship in both their lives soured, one of the most productive, creative relationships in the romantic world, broke down. There had been tensions in their relationship from the very beginning. Once they returned to France from their honeymoon in Mallorca, the first signs of strain in their life together began to show. Whether they were in Paris or at Sand's country house at Nohant in the Berry, they were constantly surrounded by a huge menagerie of friends. Chopin's long hours of giving lessons meant that he was in the company of others for most of the day, but when they found themselves on their own, especially without even Sand's children, they quickly got on each other's nerves. There may have been faults on both sides, but Chopin was exceptionally fractious, tending to be self-centered, irritable, and moody, to say the least. Sand found it trying to be alone with him at Nohant, and resenting Chopin's Polish manservant, Jan. Jan regularly quarrelled with Sand's maid, Suzanne. She was forever taunting him over his thick Polish accent, while he responded with a stream of abuse. Sand found Jan stupid and humorless, and she found infuriating the way he rang the dinner bell so loudly and so long. Sand's children disliked him too. Eventually, Chopin was forced to dismiss him. These weren't huge issues, but there were certainly signs that cracks were beginning to appear. They really were town mouse and country mouse. Sand was fed up with the bustle of life in Paris, preferring the peace and quiet of Nohant. Chopin was bored stiff there, refusing to join excursions that Sand arranged for visitors and commenting, "I am not cut out for life in the country." The winter of 1845-6 was an especially terrible one. Chopin's health deteriorated again and showed no sign of improving, rather the reverse, and his state of mind was not good either, as he grew ever more certain that his relationship with Sand was inevitably steering towards the rocks. His nocturnes were the pieces, above all, that made Chopin's name, passionate, delicate, tender, tinged with sadness, hinting at dreams and inner secrets. Rubinstein played Chopin's pair of nocturnes, Opus 55, both dedicated to his Scottish pupil James Stirling, who was plainly in love with him and who would play an important Chopin's final years. But that's another story. The following summer, 1846, the weather at Nor was very hot. The River Arun wasn't far from the house, and to cool off, Sam would go down and bathe, lying on the bed of the river and smoking. She was often joined by her daughter Solange, but though Chopin, he would never actually get in the water, preferring to swelter in whatever shade he could find. Chopin, ever fastidious about his appearance, was appalled, it seems, to find himself sweating, and even more horrified to discover that he'd begun to smell just like anyone else. Sam recalled, "We laughed until the tears to see this ethereal being refusing to sweat like everyone else. But don't breathe a word about this to him. It would only make him furious." Clearly, he was not a man who could stand being laughed at. There were still enjoyable social occasions, such as the soirée when Chopin, who played for hours, treated them to a panel of a Bellini opera, singing all the parts himself, and then to an imitation of a faulty mechanical music box. One of the guests, Elisa Fournier, left a description of his performance. "Had we not been in the same room, we could never have believed that it was a piano that was tinkling beneath his fingers. All the rippling finesse and rapidity of the little steel struts which caused the invisible cylinder to vibrate were rendered with matchless delicacy." Did anyone in that gathering realize that the relationship between their entertaining hosts was well on the way to unraveling terminally? The friction between Chopin and Sand grew. The Polish countess, Laura Chosnowska, an old friend of Chopin's family, was one of the visitors that summer. Sand took an immediate dislike to her. Jokes about the fact that she smelled of musk and that a little lapdog smelled of something awful. Chopin was deeply offended by this disrespectful treatment of his guest. When he proposed that another Polish friend might visit, Sand refused point blank on the grounds that there were no spare bedrooms. If St. Maurice was allowed to bring a friend to Nor, Chopin recognized that he was now being left out, relegated to a marginal position in the household. In this tense atmosphere, after months of work on it, Chopin was still struggling with his cello sonata. "I do everything I can in order to work, but it's no good. As this goes on, my compositions will not resemble chirruping of warblers or even the sound of smashing china. We'll hear the scherzo, and it's hard not to wonder whether it might reflect something of that pent-up frustration Chopin was feeling at the time." In the scherzo from Chopin's Cello Sonata, we know the cellist Johannes Moser and pianist Emma Couplet. The atmosphere at Knoll that summer evidently became ever more fractious and abrasive, and presumably more obvious to the guests in the house. During the visit of Countess Laura, Sand remarked that Chopin's sister was worth 100 of him. Chopin's barbed response was, "I am perfectly well aware of it. One has to be as sweet a soul as Ludwika to leave pleasant memories of everyone here." Despite the growing unpleasantness of the relationship, Chopin was haunted by the fear of being alone. He told Ludwika, "Now I don't have a single one of my school friends left alive in Paris." A particular fear of his was of dying alone, far from home, family, and friends. However, at the end of the summer, Chopin did return from North to Paris. Rumour seemed to have travelled ahead of him. Certainly his arrival on his own set Parisian society tongues wagging, and they had already made up their minds. The rumour machine was running on full power. Liszt was then on an extended tour and gave his final public concert in Elizabethgrad in Ukraine. From there he wrote to Marie Dagout to ask, "Is the break between Chopin and Madame Sand definite? And for what reasons?" One reason was George Sand's latest novel. Delacroix had visited Nantes that summer and witnessed some excruciatingly embarrassing. Had been nursing and sustaining a sentence for 8 years. By this time, Chopin gave her no gratification of any kind. She dealt with this sensationally by opening up their lives and their relationship. Novel Lucrezia Floriani. Lucrezia is a model of maternal love, progressively drained and poisoned, and parasitic lover, Fritz Carroll. The age difference between them was 6 years, exactly the same as between Sand and Chopin. Lucrezia has already had a string of love affairs and is famous all over Europe, so rather simple the writer who created her. Carroll comes to live with Lucrezia at the Villa Floriani, where, when he falls ill, he's nursed through his sickness. As he worked on the story during the late nights and small hours of the morning, it was Sand's habit to read aloud what she'd written to the assembled company in the evening at North. The veil of fiction was surely utterly transparent. Delacroix. I was frankly in agony during the reading. Tim and the executioner amazed me equally. Madame Sand seemed completely at ease, and Chopin did not stop making admiring comments about the story. So, as if to draw a line under their relationship at Noel, Sand was putting the finishing touches to Lucrezia Floriani, while Chopin, all unaware, was working in the room next door on his Polonaise fantasy and the Barcarolle. The barcarolle is a form he'd never attempted before, and it's in a class of its own. Chopin was by now living in the misty world of what might have been, and that seems to have had its fruitful side in the form of this great musical inspiration. Georges Sand had intended to take Chopin away for a year of Venetian sun, but this dream trip was sunk by her son Maurice. The pianist Carl Tosig thought of it as a love scene in a discreet gondola, the symbol of a lover's meeting. Chopin's Barcarolle was played by Yevgeny Kissin. That's one of the last pieces Chopin composed at Nohant, the troubled paradise where over 7 long summers he composed much of his finest music. After he packed his bags in November 1846, he never again. Alone as he now was, Chopin didn't retreat into hermit-like solitude, but kept up his busy social life in Paris. He posed for his portrait by the painter Ali Scheffer, and sat for a sketch by the famous German portraitist of the royal dynasties of Europe, Franz Xaver Winterhalter. It shows him in profile, and what a profile that is, head held high with that noble aquiline nose shown off to perfection. It seems to exude a confidence and sensitivity. It doesn't give away the fact that, according to contemporary accounts, Chopin had an expressive and extremely mobile face. nor does it give any hint of Chopin's state of health at the time it was made. Winterhalter signed and dated the sketch the 2nd of May, 1847, was in the middle of an agonizing 4-day-long asthma attack. Sand admitted in a letter to her publisher, "For the last 7 years I have been living with the certainty that I shall not see him age at my side, but one never gets used to these horrible certainties, and one goes on suffering. Done me so much harm with his sickness." And to Chopin's good friend Rijmola, "It is all very difficult and delicate. I see him fading away without ever having been able to do him any good, since it is this anxious, jealous, and touching affection he bears for me which is the main cause of his misery." This was also in the midst of an unedifying fracas, which would be the final blow to end their relationship. Quarrel over children who were no longer children, the death knell of their bizarre relationship. Chopin had grown close to Solange, George Sand's daughter. Solange's own relationship with her mother had been somewhat fractious in recent years. Solange had difficulty coping with the fact that her mother adopted a young girl whom she didn't get on with. Solange had fallen in love with a sculptor, Auguste Clésinger. He was a pretty transparent gold digger. Sand was at first charmed by him, but eventually saw him for what he was and believed him. The couple got married anyway. There were very, very ugly scenes when Clésinger discovered his wife wasn't as well supposed, and Sand, in the end, threw them both out of the house after verbal abuse and physical violence involving the sculptor's mallet. There were even threats of murder. Sand admitted, "We were within an ace of cutting one another's throats." And all this in front of the priest who had 2 weeks before officiated for the marriage ceremony. Chopin didn't attend the wedding and didn't support Sand. He was in Paris suffering from the after effects of that asthma attack. Sand, given all she'd done for him, felt his taking Solange's side as a betrayal, accusing him of crossing over to the enemy and thanking God for this strange end to 9 years of exclusive friendship. In a 71-page letter, she told a friend, "For 9 years, I was bound to a corpse." The romance was over. In the second movement, Romance from Chopin's Piano Concerto No. 1, we heard Grigory Sokolov as soloist with the Munich Philharmonic conducted by Witold Rowicki. Chopin's biographer, Frederick Niecks, took the view that the rupture between Chopin and song was the catastrophe of Chopin's life. Word reached Chopin in Paris that Sand had taken on a young lover who was getting Chopin's old wound at Nohant. He wrote to a friend, "I am like an old cobweb, and the walls are beginning to fall away." The walls really were, as in a highly symbolic move, Sand demolished the connecting wall that had separated their bedrooms, stripping the wallpaper and replacing it with a different pattern, and sending his piano back to Pleyel. Sand and Chopin only ever met one more time. They were both invited to a reception at the house of their friend Charlotte Maliani, who'd separated from her husband and moved away from the Square of Orleans. Neither the other was there until they coincided on the stairs. She took his hand, which she said was trembling and cold. He raised his hat and left without saying a word. Sometime after this, Chopin, who by then was in London, wrote to his friend Rivard, "I have never cursed anyone, but now I am so weary of life that I am near cursing Lucrezia. That she suffers too. Alas, everything goes wrong with the world."
Maurizio Pollini playing the second of Chopin's waltzes in the set published as his Opus 64, ending Composer of the Week with Donald MacLeod. And next week he takes a look at the musical puzzle that was César Franck.
When I started, Cole was king. That's how it was referred to. Cole was king.
50 workplace. One of the biggest coal-fired crowd in the world.
It's elemental, isn't it? It's the smell and feel and the sound.
Returning in my father's footsteps, I delved deep inside one of the last remaining coal-fired units in the UK.
The turbine, a couple of the tons spinning round at 3,000 a minute.
Am I eyes deceiving me, or do we have clouds in here? Diamonds. With me, Andrew Coulter.
See what happens if I shout.
Wait! It's not bad, is it? On Sunday evening at 6:45 on Radio 3 and BBC Sounds.
Well, hello and a very good afternoon to you. Welcome along to Radio 3 if you've recently tuned this way. It's Ian Skelly here to tell you what's in store in the afternoon show on Radio 3 today. I'm here from 2 with one of Rossini's most famous overtures, all about a Swiss hero who shoots an apple off his son's head. Vivaldi will report from the Olympics. Delius will take you on a walk to the Paradise Garden. And I have a couple of performances from my featured orchestra this week, the brilliant Bavarian Radio Symphony Orchestra, playing Mozart in a stormy symphony in the big spotlight at 3. And they'll also be playing an equally youthful composer trying his hand at writing a symphony. It was to be Richard Strauss's second and last, a rarity among the gems, throughout the afternoon here on Radio 3 from 2 o'clock. But now it's 1 o'clock, time for a summary of the BBC News on Radio 3. It's read today by Danielle Jarowiecka.
The General Secretary of the RMT Union, Mick Lynch, says he's hopeful that a formal offer will be made to rail workers in the coming days aimed at ending their strikes. Meanwhile, fresh strike action before and during the Christmas period has been announced by members of the PCS union who maintain roads in England and by ground handlers working at Heathrow Airport. The oil giant Total Energies says it will cut its planned investment in the North Sea by 25%, or £100 million next year. The decision by the French firm follows the government's expansion of windfall tax on oil and gas companies. Downing Street said it was right and fair that those with the broadest shoulders should contribute the most tax. The Archbishop of Canterbury has warned that leaders in Ukraine mustn't come under pressure to accept what is described as a forced peace. Justin Welby was speaking on a visit to the country. Moscow says it isn't prepared to meet President Biden's conditions for beginning talks about the war. Mr. Biden said negotiations could only take place after Russian troops withdrew from Ukraine. The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has said his party's victory in the City of Chester by-election shows the public are fed up with the government. Samantha Dixon increased Labour's majority to almost 11,000. The former Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, says he won't stand again as an MP at the next election. He's the latest Conservative to announce his withdrawal from Parliament. And Poland has condemned a German auction house after it sold a painting that had been stolen from Warsaw's National Museum nearly 40 years ago. A Polish government spokesman said he had no words to describe what he called the scandalous sale of the Kandinsky watercolour, which went ahead even after the auctioneers were informed the painting had been stolen. Now look at the weather. Cloudy with sunny spells in many areas of the UK, with patchy rain in eastern areas. Temperatures will reach highs of 5 Celsius in Cardiff, 8 in London and Edinburgh, and 9 in Belfast. That's the BBC News and weather at 2 minutes past 1.
Danielle, thank you very much. Time now for Radio 3's lunchtime concert, which was recorded during the pandemic, so it had a reduced audience. And once again, it's introduced by Sarah Walker.
We're reaching the end of a week of superb chamber music concerts put together by Radio 3 new generation artist, the Consone Quartet. These exceptionally talented young performers specialise in playing classical and early romantic music on period instruments, and they have the honour of being the only period instrument string quartet to have been accepted onto the scheme in its 21-year history. Well, the music we'll hear today is by Mendelssohn, his F minor quartet, composed in tragic circumstances after the death of his beloved sister Fanny. It's a work of astonishing emotional depth and the perfect way to end this week of chamber music. But before that, we have something very different, a characterful work by the father of the string quartet, Joseph Haydn. It's his so-called Frog Quartet, a piece of brilliant and unusual sonorities, not least in the finale. After 3 mostly serious movements, Haydn throws an unusual frog-like effect called barriolage into the mix, an effect where the player rapidly repeats the same note on adjacent strings. The effect is even more comic at the very end of the piece, where all the instruments figure at the same time. So here it is, Haydn's String Quartet, Opus 50, number 6, The Frog, played by the Consoni Quartet.